If you want to make sure that you're on a podcast, then say something and say your name, and you'll be recorded. Holly, do you want me to pass the pearls around as we're talking, or just I'll make sure I do it correctly?
I think we're just going to keep it up there and,
Okay.
and let people just initiate on themselves.
Great.
And they feel the pearl of wisdom come over them.
Wonderful.
I think that's
All right,
okay
good.
with her.
As they feel overwhelmed with excitement and energy. All right, good. So first of all, thank you all for having me here this evening. I really appreciate it. As Holly mentioned, my name is Ken Schmitt. I'm a quasi-native of San Diego. I was 9 months old when I came here from New York. I've been here my entire life. How many are actual true natives that were born here? See, it's a very small group, right? We have a secret knock and handshake and everything.
Yeah, I was just going to say 9 months. No.
See, everybody else is like,
No,
oh, you're
you don't
native, but you
qualify.
9 people are like, oh, you are so not a native. All right, that's who you're talking to. But so anyway, so I love San Diego. I went to, which is now Cathedral, went to Uni High School. I went to USD as well. I grew up in Rancho Bernardo. I've lived in Carlsbad now for 24 years. I have to also disclose that I'm married to a marriage and family therapist. So in terms of communicating with all ages and ethnicities and genders, I pride myself on that. Hopefully my wife will say the same thing. We'll find out tonight. But anyway, so it's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation to come and speak. The panel is amazing. I mean, we have such a great variety of perspectives and insights we'll talk about tonight. We had a conversation beforehand also about a week or so ago, and we decided as a group we wanted to make this a very open, organic, and more of a dialogue, if you will, versus a lecture. So please feel free to ask questions as we go. Don't feel like you have to wait until the very end to ask your questions, your burning questions. We want to make this as live and relevant as possible. So please feel free to ask questions also. Okay. Anything else I'm forgetting as far as ground rules? We're good? All right, great. All right, perfect. Okay, good. So I'm going to start. We're going to work our way down the line. Each person's going to introduce themselves, give you a sense for kind of where they are in terms of their career, what they do today, and also kind of how they're involved with the women's movement and things that are happening in their respective organizations also. So do you want to start? We'll work our way down, Amy. Thank
Sure.
you. Yeah.
My name is Amy Waterman, and I work for Intel Corporation. I've been there about 2 amazing years, and in that, my current role is I lead a team that's doing technology advocacy for the company, and that's related to emerging technologies on all sides, but in particular in wireless. We're talking with governments, we're talking with analysts, really anybody who can influence and needs to understand that Intel is leading in those areas. So that's what I'm doing now. And there was a second part to your question.
Yeah, just in terms of any initiatives that you're involved in or things that you're doing that are out of the ordinary.
Yeah. Well, I have a daughter, so I'm very active with her. Yeah, she's 20, and she's one of those amazing young women, and I'm really excited to see what happens with this generation of young women. So there's a lot of, she's very focused on, in particular, providing access to care for the underserved. So through her, I'm doing a lot of work with her through the organizations that she's involved with. I will also say that Intel has been walking the talk for a long time as it relates to diversity and inclusion as a company. And it has been an amazing thing to witness over the last 2 years. I have worked in tech since 1995, but I had no idea that this sort of work was going on within a multinational company. So really excited, and a bunch of my team from my office here in San Diego are here tonight.
Thank you. And just a quick FYI also, as the goal of tonight's conversation, and really kind of the theme, will be women in technology. Now, the clarification is that could be any role. So it doesn't just mean women that are in engineering roles in technology, but you could be in sales, you could be in accounting, you could be operations, QA. It doesn't make a difference. It's just in the technology sector as a whole, regardless of what your functional expertise might be. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're talking also. Yeah. So, Alicia?
Great. My name is Alicia Young. I work for Intuit. And so the first question I have of this group here is, how many of you know Intuit and what we do? Oh, our brand campaign's working. Yay!
How many love the new commercials?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, the Giant. Did you watch watch the Giant YouTube? Yay, okay. So that's usually the first thing we get asked is Intuit, QuickBooks, TurboTax? Okay. So I've been with Intuit for 10 years. I actually, if I were to go back in my history, I feel like I'm sort of a walking Intuit commercial because I actually started in accounting and using our products, and then over the course of 25 years, eventually came to work for the company. My current role is actually not in the actual, what you might think is the technology sector, but I am bringing technology to it in interesting ways. But what I do today, I'm a staff program manager for a workplace services group, which is basically for, old school that was facilities. But because we are a technology company and we have such great employee experiences, we have on-site cafes, we have on-site fitness centers, we have on-site shipping and receiving mail. I'm the program manager behind all of that, the relationships behind all of that. So companies like Ricoh are actually providing the service. Compass, who's providing the service. These very large, wonderful organizations are providing the services, but I get to manage those relationships, and I get to manage those programs. So when you talk about something like food, which is always getting people interested, I'll say that's the most interesting part of what I do, because it's something that people are very passionate about. One, everybody's got an opinion on food. I am not a chef. I am not a nutritionist. I have no educational background in food whatsoever, which sort of get that look sometimes from people. But I will say my passion for bringing that desired experience to the forefront for our employees, and for working and through the relationship piece, which can be tough when you're trying to negotiate between our partner vendors and our internal teams. What are we delivering? How are we delivering it? And providing that level of service. So that's the exciting part of what I do today.
Anne.
My name is Ann Riley. I'm the Director of Design in our Enterprise Business Solutions Group, which at Intuit, which is essentially an IT organization. Bless you. And I'm coming up on my 20th anniversary at Intuit. This in April is my anniversary date, and I often tell the story that when I went there, I for the first time and interviewed, I was sitting in the lobby and watching people walk by, and I thought, everyone looks so happy. Now, granted, I was coming off of a bad gig, but I thought, wow, I can't believe. And it's funny. The other day I talked to a group of our new hires, and I told that story, and I said, I still feel that way about that place, like it's just still a really great place to work. And I've had the opportunity to really kind of reinvent myself a number of times while I've worked there, which has been really great, and which has kept my interest in a way that if I was doing the same thing for all those years, I probably wouldn't have made it. So my design team works on internal applications for all of our employees, 8,000 employees. So the CIO a few years ago came to me, and I had worked with him in other business units, and he said, I want to build an experienced design team within an IT organization. And I said, I think you're out of your ever-loving mind. I think that would not be a good thing. And he said, no, I think it really would be, and I want you to lead it. And so he gave me an opportunity to really hire my own team. I started off with just a couple of designers and researchers, and I have a team of 10 that we work and we've got more work than we can do on internal applications, making things easier for our employees to use so that they can spend their time helping our customers as opposed to navigating some horrible set of tools. So Intuit has always been known as someone who really cares about their customer. So we'd care so much about our customers, and then we just torture the heck out of our internal users. So it's my job to make their job a little bit easier. So tonight, I'm happy to say that I have my daughter here. So she's a recent grad. She got her master's in gerontology. So all of you that are aging, you're going to want to know her. I told her I'm going to pay your.
Not aging.
I told her I'm going to pay for your tuition so that you can take care of me in my later years. So, and I also have another guest here, Rachel. And Rachel is working in the technology sector and is very interested in this world. And we connected maybe 6 months ago, and she has a real interest in design, and so I'm happy to have 2 guests along with me tonight.
My name is Maria Keckler, and I am the accidental techie in the group. I was telling Ken. I moved to the United States when I was 16, so I actually started my higher education later than most of you probably. I had to learn English first. And I, in fact, when I started my college education, it was right around the time that the internet was really beginning to take off. And I remember saying, I'm going to major in English so that I will never have to do technology. So I did major in English, and my vision was that I was going to be a college professor of some sort, and I found myself focusing on technical communication. And I was teaching technical communication for engineers because they needed to know how to be able to translate their highly technical knowledge into readable manuals so that people could actually read them. And it was just so interesting that some people around me began to take notice that I had a real knack for taking highly technical communication and making it very, very simple. And one of my professors, who had been retired from international consulting with tech companies, he began to pull me into some projects with some clients. And he said, you should really start your own business. And so I did. I started a technical communication consulting agency, and I began to do all kinds of things. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I had no idea that this was a way to make money. But it was really fun. I actually still wanted to teach. And when my very first class teaching technical communication, I remember standing in front of all these engineers, brilliant, and I asked them a question. They were supposed to bring all these devices, leftover pieces from their old technology, and build some hypothetical product device, and then they were going to write a manual. And I asked them a question, let's come up with some ideas, and it was dead silence. And later I found out that they were like, their brains were going, but there was no dialogue, and I thought, I don't think I can do this for 16 weeks without anybody talking except me. So I decided to learn how could I put some discussion boards online. So over a weekend I learned how to use Blackboard, who probably some of you have used in educational technology, and it just like this light bulb went on for me. I put on a discussion board, 24 hours, and I said, I want you to offer an idea and then comment on 2 more ideas. And within an hour, there were 500 threads of conversation. And it was just this light bulb went on, and I thought I can use technology to engage people and to help them really be involved in the conversation. And that's how technology, kind of entered my life, just to use it to engage students and to help them communicate better. And the rest is history, which we'll talk about today.
So how many of you are in a tech company today, whether it's hardware, software, or something tech related? Almost everybody? Okay. And how many of you got into tech before you got into tech without any previous tech experience, where technology was a brand new thing for you? Okay. So that's one of the things about our panelists as well, which is actually pretty common to what Maria was talking about. The fact that technology is one of those industries where everybody in tech thinks that you can't possibly understand what we do in our company unless you've done it somewhere before. And as a recruiter, I can tell you I have a lot of clients that will say, oh, we can't find anybody out there that can do this job because no one comes from our sector. Technology is known for that. So let's talk a little bit about how you kind of get into tech. For those of you that might want to be either getting into it or want to maybe change directions within the tech environment, go from software to hardware or B2B to B2C. Maybe some insights from the panel about getting into technology. So Amy, do you want to start in terms of how you first got into it? Yeah.
So I have a degree in English.
Oh wow, there you go.
Yeah, so I didn't really want to work in a tech company either, but I didn't really know what they were. Just a little of my background. Out of college, I started working in the investment industry, and one of the things, if you're pursue a liberal arts degree, is you are very skilled at research as a result. And so I was in the process of studying for my certified financial analyst exam. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like a CPA exam. It takes years to get.
Self-certification, yeah.
I was going to manage, big funds or something like that, and ended up at a small venture firm in San Diego, and I hated it. Oh my God, it was so boring. And so I started looking around for really anything to do just with that research skill, and got a job offer from Hewlett-Packard and Qualcomm. And Qualcomm, nobody knew who they were, but I said, this looks interesting. And I remember the head of engineering during my interview, my being very frank with him and saying, I don't really know anything about wireless technology. I did a little research, now this is going to date me when I say this, on the paging industry. I don't really know anything about wireless. And he said, and when you get inside and you get a really thoughtful technologist there, they'll do this. He said it doesn't matter. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody who can dig in and explain what the market opportunity is going to be. And, the career just went from there. And there are a lot of people who have that story. I'm looking at my colleague who's in the audience with us. She also didn't have a background in technology. You just have to have a curiosity.
Yeah, exactly. And having a chance to hopefully interview with somebody who will give you that chance as well,
right.
as opposed to the domain experts that think that you have to know what I know, otherwise, why are you here?
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
Great.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Does that only apply when an industry is very young? Like they kind of don't have a lot of experts, so they just need any intelligent, capable people to just start doing something, versus a mature industry that they have people lining out the door that do exactly what they want.
Yeah, I can't speak for every industry, but I think there are opportunities across industries. And if I think about it from a technology point of view, there are advantages and disadvantages to getting in with a startup. I mean, I think what you're saying is true, that they're just looking for bodies. And so anybody who looks like they could possibly do the job is good enough. But I will say, in working for Intel, this is a 100,000 people company that has, over the past year, tried to turn that ship. And believe me, it's been quite an ordeal. But they also are taking some risks, and they're bringing in people. They're bringing in wireless people. They've never done that before, or they did it and they didn't do it very well before. Maybe that was it. So in technology, to remain relevant, you will be looking for that. And I'll just say, interestingly, just last week, one of the things that technology companies are looking at right now is artificial intelligence, and what is that going to mean? And you will see technology companies from Intel, Google, across the board are bringing back really these PhDs that were looking at artificial intelligence in the 80s, and they are back now. And so things also don't go well.
Of course, the engineers are also in their 80s now.
So I think it depends. It probably depends on the industry, but I think there probably are opportunities all around. Like if you sit still, that's a bad thing for your bottom line.
And I would just say, from a recruiting perspective, in terms of hiring people, if you are looking to make a job change and you want to get into a company that seems to have a lot of technologists in that company, and maybe you don't have that experience, do some research, get a sense for who's working out there, look at LinkedIn, and then one of your differentiators when you go out to interview is that I see you have a lot of folks that come from wireless or come from the AI sector, or whatever it may be. I come from a different space and bring a different perspective that will complement what you already have. So you can use that to your advantage also, I think, as a way to differentiate and really stand out and add new value to the corporation. So, yeah.
I have to sort of giggle when I hear Amy's story a bit, because very similar start. I came out of school, I had an accounting degree, and wasn't quite sure what to do with it, and started working for a wealth management firm. I don't know if they just take anybody at that point. Very young, very young. But this was a while ago, and so as I started in sort of this, I'll say it was mostly a glorified admin assistant role. Basically, I was helping our CFO at the time just develop reports for our clients, and since I had the accounting background, I was very good at spreadsheet, or we didn't really have Lotus 1-2-3, so there I'm dating myself. I was good at Lotus, I learned Lotus, and this was as we were starting to make the transition from Lotus into this new product called Microsoft. Ooh, Windows. And so things that we were doing very manually and that he and I had been working through with all these manual reports all of a sudden started to come through this box. And we knew that this box was powered by some other box in this closet that nobody knew about in the back of the room. We had some consultant we had to call on the phone whenever something happened. Well, it turned out in this office of maybe 50, 60 people, I was the only one when that box went down who would walk back to the closet and push the button. And before I knew it, I became a system administrator. Back in the days, Nobel, and I'm really dating myself now, but that was really it, is because of spreadsheets and moving from Lotus 1-2-3 into Microsoft Excel, and all of a sudden we got color graphs. They thought I was like a god. I could bring color, and I remember the first color printer, and they just thought it was amazing that we didn't have to get these pens out and do all this work. So I became the technology guru over several years with this company. I had some really crazy license. It wasn't the big one, but I was a financial operations principal. It was a big deal to get my license in the area that I had it at the time. But the more they were pulling me towards finance and go negotiate with the banks and go do these things, because that was, as my role evolved, it was more in the accounting and controller side, I hired somebody to do the technology piece and to go push the button in the back of the room. And over time, as she told me, this is the internet. And I actually remember her coming in and telling me what Google was. And like, wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. You can actually do, wait, why would you do this on this thing? And this is even when email wasn't even that fully
I have my
integrated.
pager. What else could I possibly need?
Not everybody had email addresses. And then why do you need to give everybody access to this internet thing? And what are they going to do with it? So those were a lot of the questions that we were faced with at that time. And again, as I said, I saw myself going into very different roles within the organization. And as they kept saying, well, we want you to go more here, I kept saying, I want to go more over there. This is more fun. This is more exciting. I like this side. And that's where I realized that there's an inner geek in me that I needed to really go understand and explore. So, just through happenstance, I happened through this time to be working with an accounting software application that was very popular in property management at the time, still on DOS, and they were trying to make a transition from DOS to Windows. And I remember when I talked to the recruiter at the time, you decided to leave, talked to a recruiter and they said, would you come interview for a position as an MRI system analyst? MRI? I don't want medical field. That's not where I want to go. I don't know what this is. Well, MRI was the name of the software. And then it just so happened, again, as I say, I feel like a walking commercial for Intuit. Intuit acquired the company that was known as MRI back at the time. So it just happenstance throughout my career, this application that I became familiar with sort of became that guiding point for where I took my career. I was a systems analyst with right across the street here. The company who at the time owned Westfield, who owned the malls that Westfield now owns and who just sold to somebody else. We had a local San Diego company called Trizac Hahn. Again, probably dating some folks if you knew who the Hahn company was that started Horton Plaza. So that backbone of the Hahn company and Trizac Hahn was all run on this application system called MRI. When Intuit bought them, it became known as Intuit Real Estate Solutions. And I became, again, probably, I'll just say, 6-7 years of really engrossed in that application as a true expert on how to use the software. I also was working for a company who was going through a transition that we all know now as Y2K. Anybody remember that? And because I was into software and working for a tech team, what started happening, if those of you who remember that time, was people were ditching their jobs right, left, and center to go for the next big opportunity because Y2K was paying, twice what normal rates were at the time. And so our entire IT department just literally within 2 weeks was gone. We had a team of 10 folks that looked for that other Y2K opportunity and took off. Well, I was the only one left. So literally they looked at me and said, you're the new IT director. And because, again, I had that comfort level with systems. I understood hardware. I wasn't really understanding network, but I knew how to, go back to what you were saying, I knew how to interpret the words. I knew how to talk the technical talk, even though I couldn't sit down and necessarily do all the commands. I knew how to talk to the engineers who could do that and translate between the business needs and the engineering needs, and make sure that those systems stayed running.
Wow.
So that's honestly how I fell into IT. It wasn't by choice.
All about pushing the right button.
Just about pushing the right button, and it actually sort of became a theme, because it became my theme for myself is reboot. I learned how to reboot, and that's what I've done also within my career. Is when I started in any sort of a role, if it started to get too technical, I'd back away from a little bit, and I'd reboot again. And then I would start to rethink, okay, I don't want to just be a systems analyst and just know one application. How can I expand my knowledge? And that's where some of those other growth opportunities fall into your lap where you're not even really trying. But by rebooting myself multiple times is how I sort of landed into the role I am today.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Question, sorry, yeah.
I was actually going to ask you a question, and because you touched on it again, and one of the things that I found, because I'm in the process of rebooting my career into the tech space, and when you talked about the fact that you could translate very technical stuff into common language, do you feel that you had an advantage because of the fact that you had to come in relatively late in life and learn a new language in a place where that was the only language that was spoken? Because I firmly believe that if you can go into any space and speak the language, you can fake it till you make it, number one. But if you speak the language, you're in an entirely different space of being able to understand what other people are talking about and be able to communicate in a different way. So I was curious if you thought that was helpful in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I love how you worded that question, because one of the aha moments I had was when I was recruited to come to San Diego. I was teaching at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and because of the work that I was doing there, just for my own teaching, but then the word started spreading, on campus, and so I would have professors come to me. I'm hearing these amazing results you're having with your students. Can you teach me? So it was just very informal. And I was recruited to come and implement those, instructional technology initiatives here. And what was interesting is that I immediately began to see a pattern. The IT department, which was hiring me to be their director of instructional technology, they had a very concrete agenda. We need to kind of, step into the 21st century. There's no technology here. We need to implement it and become competitive. And it was a 100% male department, and very.
How many of you are in departments where it's all men, except for you, or the majority? Let's say more than 50%.
And so I'm working. I'm the only woman working in that department. Plus I'm Hispanic, English is my second language. I'm not really a techie, So it's just all these different, just differences. And but I saw myself more as an educator. And so what they decided to do, I don't know exactly what the inner conversations were going on, but they said, what, I think that instead of you having an office in the IT department, let's put your office where the faculty offices are, which I actually thought was quite brilliant, because the faculty and the administrators that I was supposed to really bring into the technology, they saw me as a peer. And so I would go into the IT department and we would have these conversations about how we're going to get these people to use technology. They don't want to use it. They're so illiterate with technology. And I would be hearing their frustration. And even though it just many times sounded sexist and just, plain, irreverent, I began to kind of interpret that, as a language. They're really being pushed to bring the organization to a level, that matched, really where everybody was at. And so they were trying to live up to that expectation, so they had their own internal pressures. And so their bottom line, if you will, is that we need to get this organization up to speed. And the professors and the administrators, they were very frustrated because we've always done it this way. Why do we have to change? And they felt, so here's something anybody here has a PhD? Okay, so, you have gone to school for a number of years, right? You know your stuff, you're brilliant, you have done a lot of work. So imagine you have this department with people talking down to you as if you are very, very silly person. And so I began to see this communication dynamics. You know, you can't talk to people who are at the top of their profession like that. You cannot belittle just because they can't use the technology. And I remember distinctly, you know, just really trying to bridge that gap. And so I would go into the IT department and I would say, can I just tell you why there's this pushback? You know, for these professors, their bottom line, their ROI is learning taking place. And then I would go and talk to the professors and I would advocate for the IT people. Can I just tell you what's going on? You know, they are really being forced to bring us up to the 21st century so that we can actually have students want to come here. And so I found that I became really a bridge builder, which I ended up writing a book about, because it was about bridging that gap between, you know, expectations and the way that we're talking to each other. And I realized that that was like my biggest competitive advantage, that I was able to advocate for both. I was able to bridge those gaps. And that like took me to a new level, you know, beyond just after I left my work there and I started my own consulting company. I realized that I was bringing that wherever, and people really valued that.
Well, I think you also eliminate people's fear.
Yes.
On both sides.
Yeah.
So the fear of the IT group not meeting their goals and the fear of the other people to change. If you eliminate people's fear, they're a lot more open to
Yeah.
But it's all about language.
I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to start with you, Anne, in terms of your feedback here. So switching from talking about being a non-techie in the tech world, let's switch and start talking about being a woman in the tech world, okay? And a few things that have been brought up so far are, I think, are very unique and traits that you don't see a lot of times stereotypically in women. Risk-taking, you know, being willing to push back and be that adversary or that liaison, right, between the IT folks and the folks that aren't being understood. The willingness to go out there and do something different and to change careers completely. It's a lot of risk-taking, right? How many of you consider yourselves risk-takers? It's only that half of the room. It's like right down the middle. There's one person over here. Okay, that's great. So maybe, Anne, maybe you can touch on that in terms of just the traits of being a woman in technology and the good and the bad and the challenges. Let's talk about that.
So when I was recruited to come into this role, it was a really technical role, and you know, I lead a design team, so I thought, oh, this is going to be really great. Coming in, the touchy-feely girl is going to have to come in and teach all of them how to be more, you know, empathetic and things like that. And I thought that I would really get, you know, kind of straight-armed. And it actually has been absolutely the opposite. And if I had listened to my gut about how much terror I felt in doing that, I would have not done it. I ended up I sit on the staff of the CIO, and we often have conversation, a lot of technologists at the table, a lot of people who are, you know, engineering backgrounds, things like that. And I often tell people that I'm mentoring to find the thing that sets you apart from everybody else at the table that you're sitting at, and really make that the thing that you're really good at. And remind people that you're really good at that. So when our CIO, who's a Stanford engineer, really brilliant guy, but has, you know, not a lot of emotional EQ, not high on the EQ scale, says to me, well, I think we're doing really well with getting women in, you know, engineering spots. And, you know, I think we're doing really well in that area. And I said, really? And I said, and he, you know, I'm sitting, and he's, what? And I said, yeah. I said, you know, when I go to the bathroom, I think I told you this story. When I go to the bathroom on our floor, because our whole floor is our whole group, I said, the lights are always out. And he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, well, they're on automatic switches. And I said, when I can go into that bathroom and the lights are always on, I'll know we have enough women in our group.
Or there's a line, right?
Yeah. Well, it's really kind of stuck with him. It's like my metric for when do we have enough women in our group. And so, you know, I think that's just a... It's just a thing of, you really have to look for the thing that makes you a little bit different. And empathy is my thing in a group of people that just aren't. And so I think that helps, and it's something that, maybe you're great at it. People say women are more that way. I don't know necessarily whether that's true, but I say find the thing that you are really good at that's different than the people who are sitting at your table.
And do you remember, I know it was 20 years ago, so it was obviously different back then, but was anybody that interviewed you for the first job, were they all men? Were there any women on that interview panel?
There actually was. I came in a completely different role. I came in a marketing role,
Okay. and
I always wanted to work in tech, so I worked in a marketing role in another job, and I came in, and actually I thought, I really want to be a product manager. And so I worked my way into doing product management work and couldn't have hated it more than anything else in the world. Really hated it. And if anybody is a product manager, I'm not. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't a good fit for me. But I kept seeing this thing, this role, these people who were doing usability testing and user research. And I was like, wow, now that's what I really want to do. And so I put myself out there, and I went and talked to the woman that led that group, and I said, let me in, let me do it, and just, I'll take a reduction and I'll do whatever. They didn't make me do any of that. I was managing a group, and I had to give that up, and I went back to being an individual contributor, so I took kind of a right-hand turn in my career path, and it was really the best thing I could do. And today I'd say there's people on my team who know a heck of a lot more about design than I do, but it was a really good move, and I've ended up really benefiting from being able to kind of, that thing of reinventing yourself and not being afraid of that, I think is really important.
Any question? Yeah.
Hi, Rachel.
When you say you took that right-hand turn and you went to that individual role, what role was that specifically?
It was a user researcher in the XD space. So I had come up through a more traditional marketing area, and doing marketing, collateral marketing research, surveys, stuff like that. And but I was watching these people who were doing like observational research and things that I was like, wow, I think I could be good at that. And what's interesting is people who work in our field people all around go, I think I could do your job, and you're a designer, I think I could be a designer. And so a designer on my team told me an interesting story yesterday. She said to me, everybody thinks they're a designer. And she said, when you're designing a bicycle shed, everybody has an opinion. It ought to have 2 doors, it ought to be red, it ought to be blue, it should be this tall. And so she said, but when you're in our world, because we're working in an enterprise space, she said, it's like designing nuclear reactors. And she said, people look at it and go, looks pretty good.
They have no idea what they aren't seeing.
Yeah. So sometimes it's sort of a benefit to work in a space that's a little bit of a mystery to other people.
So I'd like to, if I could, there's no one from Intuit HR in here, right? My experience coming in was much different from Anna's.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll give you a contra to that. When I joined Intuit 10 years ago, I joined on the tech team. So I came in, actually, as I said, it was through the software channel, but we had just about to implement a brand new release of a new enterprise. This is when Intuit was still going through a bit of an identity crisis, and they had acquired all sorts of companies and had a whole bunch of different avenues that they were pursuing at the time. So it was a much different company 10 years ago, I'll tell you. We are definitely making a lot of progress. But when I came into the space, I was I'll say the new girl. I was also remote. So my core team was based in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was here in San Diego, and I would travel back and forth. I was somewhat of a subject matter expert on some of the things I brought to the table, but despite thinking I had this great background of being that liaison and really listening to people and trying to echo and understand where they're coming from before I jumped in, And thinking I was, textbook doing everything the right way, what I found was my first year with Intuit was horrible. I actually found myself on a performance plan within my first year because what I found was and I kept questioning, is this, what am I doing? How am I not coming across where I've been so successful in my career all these years? Is it me? Is it them? What is it? And I really had to do a lot of self-reflection. I actually did consult with a female mentor at the time who was with Intuit, and one of the very first pieces of advice she gave me is she said, first of all, you should never share anything about your personal life with anyone you work with, period. I thought, okay, that's interesting advice. Take it. And then, she had a few other things that she said, but I think it really, I struggled for some time, and I will say it wasn't until I finally realized I think I'm just not in the right place. This isn't the role I should be in. And now Intuit was going through, as I said, identity crisis. This was early 2009. We had the recession. The software we were supposed to roll out was going to go to banks. Banks were now going bankrupt. So bad clients to have. Yeah. So that now the product's suffering, and so the writing was on the wall, right? There was a lot of change coming, and I sort of said I've got to change myself here very quickly. And so I started looking and found another manager within Intuit who was based here in San Diego. She was a female manager who sort of looked past a lot of the issues that I was having currently, knew that there was performance issues happening, tried to talk through some of that with her, but she said, I don't care about that. The role I need you to do is this. I think you're going to be very good with this. So she took that leap of faith and sort of left all that noise behind and said, I think you're going to be very well suited for this. We need you in the role. And that sort of changed things for me. But it was still a struggle. And I'll say, there's been pockets where I'll say Intuit is very, very progressive in the thinking and the relationships and everything that we do as an organization. But at the same token, there's been incidents and pockets where I'd say there's still a lot of work we need to do. I think one of my worst stories that I'll share with you, as I was transitioning from, and Amy, you may even remember this, Amy and I used to work together many, 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 many years ago. But as I was transitioning from one big project to another, I went to my boss at one point, male, and said, hey, I'd just like to get some insight on what I might be working on next. I've been working on the same project for 3 years. It's coming to a close. I'm really excited about it. And I remember being completely crushed because I was so proud of myself that I'd worked on this for so long and that we were now seeing it close. And he said, don't you worry your pretty little head about it. Oh. And I just thought, okay, well, time to go reboot. Yeah. Time to go find something else. And that's...
So I'm curious, so when you got that advice from your mentor about not sharing personal things, okay, did you reflect and think, I've done that a lot and it seems like it hasn't been well received? Was it a group that people were more heads down and more reserved, and you doing that kind of was off-putting, or?
It was interesting because she was in a different group than the one I was in, and one of the things again that we talk about at Intuit is we love to build relationships. It's all about the personal, the relationships that we build with one another and how we work together well in teams is because of the. So I thought it was a little strange. Now, I will share she's no longer with Intuit, so obviously it didn't work for her either. But
she didn't take her own advice.
Yeah. And I didn't heed her advice. So I did at the time.
Okay.
I did self-reflect and say, okay, am I oversharing?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mom of 2 kids, and that's really part of the reason why I joined when I did. I had actually just come off of a 3-year stint as a consultant. And so I was out there on my own, and I had realized, I liked the idea of having a paycheck, a regular steady paycheck, versus trying to figure things out on my own. And so I was coming from that consultant frame of mind, and I thought maybe I am sharing too much, and that why I made this choice to come back into corporate life, and did have 2 young kids, and I like to tell stories about the kids. I did have to think about that quite a bit. But again, I just came back to this is who I am, and my authentic self is telling you about my stories as a mom, and whatever's going on. So I needed to bring my authentic self in, and that's where I stayed true.
Yeah, you don't want to have to dial that back so much
Didn't-
that you
yeah.
wind up showing up as somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like, and where I say that role was definitely not right for me.
Amy, how about yourself? Oh, I'm sorry, question?
I
Sorry,
have a
go ahead.
question. Because you've all seemed to touch on it a little bit. Alicia, you said the faith and you said a right turn, and then Amy, when you were talking about your first interview with Qualcomm and like no one knew what you were doing, but you were like, this looks really interesting. And you said something like you hope to get in front of someone who's open to your experiences, and hope like isn't really a career plan.
No, I was
That's what I'm
really
doing wrong.
intentional.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
What can you do to facilitate when you're like, I have all these skills, I want to transition to something totally different that doesn't, my resume doesn't look like I can do. How do you figure out who the right people are? How do you get in front of them and make it happen?
I think part of it is you don't start on the day when you're up to here with it, and it's kind of like people who have teenagers and then they turn to you and go, what do I do now? You know, you haven't disciplined them for 15 years and suddenly you're gonna like start disciplining them when they're 15. It's kind of like that. Like for me, it's all about the relationships that I've built. And one person knows another person who might know somebody else, and you know, it's all in networking and being intentional about who you're going to network with, not in a genuine way, not in a disingenuous way, but to really be intentional about what you want to do. I wanted to work at Intuit, but I knew that I worked for a bunch of small companies that they would never look at my resume. So I went and worked at a really big company that here in San Diego, everyone would know the name. It was horrible. It was like a horrible place to work. But, boy, people knew that name. It was on my resume. And that's how I ended up, you know, actually managing to get an interview at Intuit. So, you know, I would say be really, deliberate about what you want to do, and then start to work your way there. And if, you know, you go and talk to the right people who are maybe working in that spot and do an informational interview, something like that. You know, we encourage that a lot at Intuit. Yeah, it won't come to you. You got to go get it.
And then I'd also say, we were talking about right turns, and it's a generalization, but I believe it's true. Women are really good at this. I'm really good at this. I have, at times earlier in my career, run entire teams. And then I went and I was an individual contributor on a team, lowest person on the totem pole there. And then I managed a team again. And then I went into an individual contributor role. So you have to be open to that. You know, I've been fortunate enough where my income hasn't changed, but I would have been willing to do that, and I might be willing to do it tomorrow because it's been a really long week this week. So that's another thing. But yeah, it's that networking, and then also just being really open to whatever it is, the opportunity is that comes to you. It may not look, linear. It may look very different, and they may say, we just want you to come over. We're not quite sure what we're doing here, but we think you'd be good. Say yes to those things.
Yeah,
those are
that's
really,
Actually
really
risk-taking.
good
Yeah.
opportunities.
Yeah, Maria.
So, I think there's a theme here. I remember there's one piece of advice that has served me so well, and it actually came from my dad when I was very little. He would come home every day and pull out the chessboard, and he would teach me how to play chess as a 6-year-old. And I didn't understand this then, but every time I wanted to quit because all my pieces were pretty much gone, he would say, let me show you something. He'd reach over the board, and he would move a piece, and what do you know, I was back in the game. And he would always say that one pivot move can change the momentum of the game. And that has just been such a reminder for me. But I remember when I was working, one of my last jobs before I went in on my own, one of the greatest questions that the CFO asked me when he hired me, he said, are you a builder or are you a maintainer? And I thought that was a great question. and I would have never thought of that, but I knew it immediately the moment he asked me that I was a builder. And I love building things, I love finding solutions, I love transforming. And so when I got to the point in my, I think it had been about 4 years into that job, I was now in maintenance mode. And so that question really helped me to identify that I was now, that my frustration, it was because I was no longer in that creative building mode. And but at that point, I had already identified some things that I could do for the company. One of the things that I noticed is that there was a lot of talent across 5 different campuses, and everybody worked in silos. So they needed an expertise that really was across the street or another campus. They didn't know about it, and they went without because they didn't have the budget to bring that talent in. And so I wanted to propose to build a center for excellence that would be able to platform all these talent, whether it would be in technology skills or leadership skills or communication skills. And so knowing that I was at this point that I needed to pivot, one of the things that I, kind of not only kind of knowing yourself and having clarity about it, knowing, that he knew that about me. Like when you hire me, you knew I was a builder. And so it really helped me to think through an argument. Like I put together a proposal, I kind of worked through how am I going to argue for this new job that does not exist. But I believe that it can add value to the organization. And it took me about 3 different conversations to really get through 3 of the decision makers. And I got the green light. And so for the next 3 years, I built this center. It was my legacy to that company. And it was one of the greatest things that I did, but had I not been asked that question, I probably would have quit or not know what I was frustrated. So I would suggest, even know, what makes you tick, and then use that as a clue.
I'm always saying you never know when you're talking to somebody that could be the next move.
That's right.
Thinking your next book should be called Pivot.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, questions? Are we good? Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit. So, something that all of you have said, every single one of you in the last half hour or so, is I'm good at. Right? All of you, if you even noticed it or realized it, but you did. And that's one of the things that I would say that, unfortunately, women are not as good at, is saying and owning and being comfortable talking about what they're good at. Right? So can we talk about that a little bit and how you can get that confidence? How, I guess, A, how you identify what you are good at, and then B, how do you talk about it in a way where it's not, braggadocious, but it's owning it and being happy and pleased with the fact that you are good at something. You want to start if you
Well,
want?
the first thing I think of, I wonder if it comes with age.
Lots of things come with it.
Yeah. So I was just up in Oregon where Intel has a huge location, and we were having our intimidating staff face-to-face meetings, and with these brilliant engineers, and they cannot write to save their lives. And so I said that, I'm like, I can help you with that. I can help you with that. But I don't know that I could have done that at 25. I don't know. And I was probably a better writer at 25 than I am now.
You think is it more the delivery? Is it just the knowledge that you had more years understanding
Right,
that you are good at it?
more exposure, more,
Okay.
work experience, working in teams like that, familiarity with being in a situation where you feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of that is that. But what I think is really interesting, because I said, again, I've got a 20-year-old daughter. She's not like this. Shirley, who's sitting back at the end, in the back of this audience and helped organize this panel, we took a walk on Monday and with another girlfriend of ours, and I will tell you that, this is an example of amazing networks that you can build in tech companies. We've probably known each other since 96 or 97. And there's a group of women, we still get together and we're still talking, we're all doing different things now. But we were taking a walk around Lake Miramar and we said, I think we really were the first generation of women in tech. Now there were women before us, but this is the real, first phase. permeating all departments. And then we talked a little about what's coming. And, we've all got female children, we're around young women. They, good or bad, get to see the example that we provided, of not sleeping and, looking at our email before everybody wakes up in the morning and before they go to bed. So I'm not sure that that'll be the case moving forward. I hope not. But I think, for me it was experience and age.
Okay. Others?
I think part of it came after motherhood. Yeah, there is a part of that where you sort of start. I'll say I got more comfortable in it, and again, just part of my oversharing, I guess, was I would tell people, in a lot of times in the roles that I had, I would relate it back to, okay, am I teaching this the same way or thinking about this the same way I would with my kids, and so. It was sort of, you kind of get to a point with the kids where you feel like, all right, I've done the best I can. From this point, F it, but and that's kind of, but it's sort of, you start building that confidence. Maybe after the first you're a little more nervous, but by the second one, it's like, oh yeah, that did fall on the floor. Okay, it's fine. And I think that's the same with our careers. Is the first, as you're new in the career, you are a little more timid or shy or unafraid to speak up, perhaps in those things, or self-promote. I think that's where you were talking about this, the self-promotion. Whether it's the older or just because of, okay, I did it once and it was all right. I did it the other time, it wasn't okay, and you start to learn from those experiences and build on them just the same way you do. I think over time it just sort of starts to come out that way,
Right, sure.
and it just happens more organically.